Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. We've got a very busy episode today, wrapping up our look at the months of July, August, and September 1964. We'll look at Beach Boy activity and also at a very eventful period for television. In September, the networks began to roll out their new fall lineups. Lots of popular and well-remembered shows premiered in September, including, notably, on Monday, September 14th, from producer Irwin Allen came Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, based on his 1961 film of the same name. The ever budget-conscious Allen had wisely kept the models and submarine sets from the film, and their reuse made the series financially feasible. The series starred Richard Basehart as Admiral Harriman Nelson and David Hedison as Captain Lee Crane aboard the atomic research submarine, the Seaview. The crew of the Seaview faced a never-ending parade of monsters, space aliens, and evil geniuses in storylines that inevitably got sillier and further out as the series went on, which it will for 4 seasons, ending in 1968. In the fall of 1964, Voyage kicked off ABC's nearly all-new Monday night lineup. Immediately following the premiere of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea on ABC that night came the premiere of No Time for Sergeants, which was based on the movie of the same name, which had been based on the play of the same name, which had been based on a television episode of the same name broadcast on the anthology series The U.S. Steel Hour in 1955, all of which had starred Andy Griffith. The lead in the TV series was Sammy Jackson. It's the story of a well-meaning country bumpkin who enters the armed services and unknowingly drives everyone crazy, particularly his sergeant. If the premise sounds familiar, it's probably because Andy Griffith Productions was almost simultaneously premiering a spin-off series from The Andy Griffith Show with the same setup. On Friday, November 25th, a week and a half after No Time for Sergeants premiered on ABC, CBS premiered Gomer Pyle USMC starring Jim Nabors reprising his role from The Andy Griffith Show and Frank Sutton as Sergeant Carter. No Time for Sergeants will last 1 season. Gomer Pyle USMC will quickly become one of the highest rated shows on television and run until 1970. Premiering on Tuesday, September 15th was Peyton Place, a nighttime soap opera on ABC featuring a huge cast headed by Dorothy Malone as Constance Mackenzie, Warner Anderson as Matthew Swain, Ed Nelson as Michael Rossi, and Mia Farrow as Allison Mackenzie. For its time, it was sophisticated adult viewing. It'll air twice weekly on Tuesdays and Thursday nights for 30 minutes per episode, and will find huge success running until 1969. Recognizing the changing times, on September 16th, ABC replaced last year's folk music showcase Hootenanny with a modern rock and roll showcase, Shindig, hosted by Los Angeles disc jockey Jimmy O'Neill. The guests that night, actually the second pilot, were Sam Cooke, the Righteous Brothers, and the Everly Brothers, plus performances by series regulars Bobby Sherman and Donna Lauren. Shindig was on Wednesday nights, directly opposite CBS's #1 rated powerhouse, the Beverly Hillbillies. Though Shindig isn't a huge ratings winner, it'll do well enough that in January 1965, ABC will expand it from 30 minutes to an hour. Noting ABC's success with Shindig, NBC will launch their own music showcase, Hullabaloo, in January. More about that when we get to 1965. Premiering on ABC on Thursday, September 17th was Bewitched, the story of an advertising executive who marries a beautiful, glamorous woman completely out of his league, only to discover that she is a witch. Upon learning that she can transport them instantly to any time or place and effortlessly create anything they might ever want, he naturally wants her to stay at home cooking and cleaning. And Dora, the mother-in-law, despises him, which is probably the most plausible part of the show. It's on ABC Thursday nights following My Three Sons. Bewitched will become one of ABC's most reliable ratings winners and run until 1972. On Friday, September 18th on ABC came Johnny Quest, a primetime cartoon series clearly aimed at young boys. It featured Johnny Quest, his dad, scientist Dr. Benton Quest, his tutor and guardian, the formidable Race Bannon, his friend Haji, and their dog Bandit. The show featured wild adventure and was notable for being one of the only animated series of the time that wasn't a comedy. I remember watching the debut episode and I was immediately sold. When it was over, I almost couldn't stand the idea of waiting another week to see more. Jonny Quest was also one of the few shows being broadcast in color. Not that it made any difference to the vast majority of viewers. In 1964, just 3% of television owners had a color set. There were a few color shows, animated series like The Flintstones and The Famous Adventures of Mr. Magoo, and NBC shows like Bonanza, The Virginian, Hazel, The Joey Bishop Show, The Jack Paar Program, and of course, Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. NBC was at the forefront with color programming. Not coincidentally, its parent company RCA had created the color system adopted for the US and was also the most successful manufacturer of color TV sets. As Joel Goldenberg pointed out in comments on an earlier episode, CBS lagged behind in adopting color, possibly because their color system had been rejected in favor of the RCA system by the FCC in 1953, and they saw color as an inducement for people to buy sets from the competition, RCA. The CBS color system, by the way, was incompatible with black and white. With the RCA system, if you watched a color broadcast on a black and white set, you saw the show in black and white. With the CBS system, a color broadcast on a black and white TV would turn up as a blank screen. So the FCC definitely made the right call in going with RCA. The push for color was already on as 1964 drew to a close. In the fall of 1965, more than half of TV shows will be in color. Many of the new shows we're discussing here will go to color after their first season. Shindig, Bewitched, The Munsters, and The Addams Family will stay in black and white. Of these, only Bewitched will be renewed for a third season in 1966, when it too will go to color. 1966-67 will be known as the first all-color TV season in the US. Of course, color TV ownership will begin to skyrocket. More about all that when we discuss 1965 and 1966. Getting back to new TV shows, premiering along with Jonny Quest on ABC on Friday, September 18th was The Addams Family, based on a series of single-panel cartoons by humorist Charles Addams, which had been running in The New Yorker since 1938. Like the Addams cartoons, the show was about a happy, almost deliriously happy, family of creepy eccentrics. In contrast to Bewitched and My Favorite Martian, the Addams Family and the Munsters, who we'll talk about in a few minutes, weren't hiding who they were. They considered their eccentricities to be normal, even superior, and regarded everyone else as odd. In that respect, these shows had more in common with the Beverly Hillbillies than Uncle Martin or Darren and Samantha Stevens. The Addams Family was on ABC Friday nights right after The Farmer's Daughter. Premiering one night later on Saturday, September 19th, was Flipper. NBC's Flipper was pretty much Lassie if Lassie had been a dolphin instead of a collie. As with Lassie, little kids like myself found it tremendously upsetting when Flipper would find himself in any kind of peril. I had no trouble watching fictional humans get shot or blown up on TV every night, but if an animal seemed in danger or even mild discomfort, I'd be immediately reduced to tears. Even though I knew Flipper would be alright in the end, I don't remember watching this show as anything but stress. The series was created by Ivan Tors, who specialized in aquatic series, having earlier created Sea Hunt and the Aquanauts. It's also one of those rare 1964 shows broadcast in color. It'll kick off NBC's Saturday night lineup for 3 seasons. On Tuesday, September 22nd, came The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Robert Vaughn is Secret Agent Napoleon Solo. David McCallum was his partner, Ilya Kuryakin. And Leo G. Carroll is his boss, Alexander Waverly. The series was clearly inspired by the success of James Bond. In fact, Napoleon Solo's name came from a minor character in Ian Fleming's book, Goldfinger. Fleming gave his permission for the series creators to reuse the name for the series. Fleming, incidentally, was apparently going to be a consultant for the show. However, he died on August 12, 1964, before the show premiered, and before the biggest success of his creation, James Bond, in the movie Goldfinger at year-end. More about that later, of course. Though the series initially centers around Robert Vaughn, by the spring of 1965, David McCallum breaks out as a teen heartthrob, leading to more emphasis on his character and presenting them more as a two-man team. Man from U.N.C.L.E. was on NBC Tuesday nights following Mr. Novak. It will run until 1968. On Thursday, September 24th, came the premiere of Daniel Boone, starring Fess Parker in the title role with Ed Ames. Nearly 10 years earlier, in late 1954 and early 1955, Fess Parker had come to fame portraying Tennessee frontier hero Davy Crockett in 3 episodes of the new Walt Disney program on ABC. These episodes proved so popular that Disney had them recut for a feature film. There had been a Davy Crockett craze in the mid-50s, with kids wearing coonskin caps, t-shirts, and buying all kinds of Davy Crockett merchandise, including books, records, toys, games, bicycles, comic books, and Davy Crockett bubblegum cards. Now, Parker was back as a similar coonskin cap-wearing hero, early Kentucky settler Daniel Boone. The series didn't ignite a Daniel Boone craze, but it did prove popular and would kick off NBC's Thursday night viewing for its entire 6-season run, ending in 1970 when it would be replaced by The Flip Wilson Show. Premiering opposite Daniel Boone that night over on CBS was The Munsters. Producers Joe Connolly and Bob Mosier, who had finished a successful 6-season run with Leave It to Beaver in 1963, were back with a new family sitcom. As befit 1964, it was a different kind of family based on the classic Universal monsters of the 30s and 40s. Famously, the monster craze had been kicked off in the late 50s after Screen Gems released their package of 52 horror and thriller movies, Shock Theater, to television in 1957. Many local stations built programs around them, many with their own local horror hosts, mostly airing late on Friday or Saturday nights or on Saturday afternoons. Kids and teens responded. Merchandising followed with monster magazines, model kits, bubble bath, toys, games, some excellent but prohibitively expensive masks from Don Post Studios, and of course, bubblegum cards. Though the craze had cooled a little by 1964, it was still going strong. In fact, cultural bellwether Mad Magazine paid homage to it in their September 1964 cover, the same month the Munsters premiered. Along with the Addams Family, The Munsters was designed to tie into the monster craze. The show also provided a vehicle for Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis, who had excellent comic chemistry, as had been discovered in their scenes together on the series Car 54 Where Are You?, which had ended its 2-season run a year earlier. The comedy on The Munsters was generally pretty lowbrow and one note, but the cast, especially Gwynne and Lewis, usually made it work. The Munsters kicked off Thursday nights on CBS, just ahead of Perry Mason. On Saturday, September 26th, came the premiere of Gilligan's Island, a series we've all come to know through syndicated reruns over the last many decades. Often cited as possibly the silliest show on television, it nonetheless boasted a talented cast headed by Bob Denver, formerly Maynard G. Krebs of the Many Loves of Dobie Gillis series. On May 9, 1961, Federal Communications Commission Chairman Newton Minow had given a speech to the National Association of Broadcasters in which Minow had referred to American television programming as a vast wasteland. Minow's comments were widely reported and reprinted at the time. 3 years later, television paid sarcastic tribute to him by naming the skipper in Gilligan's boat the Minnow. Gilligan's Island is on CBS Saturday nights right after the Jackie Gleason Show. The next night, Sunday, September 27th, My Living Doll premiered on CBS. The show starred sitcom veteran Bob Cummings as psychiatrist Dr. Bob McDonald and Julie Newmar as a female robot, Rhonda, also known as Project AF-709, naive in the ways of humanity, who was entrusted to Dr. McDonald's care. With all the other crazy high-concept shows that became popular this season, it seems like this one might easily have caught on, and like so many others, lived on for decades in syndicated reruns. CBS seems to have had high hopes for the show, and gave it a time slot on Sunday nights right after the highly rated Ed Sullivan Show. Despite the strong lead-in, this put My Living Doll directly opposite NBC's juggernaut program Bonanza, which had already been crushing all competition for 5 seasons. My Living Doll had received some good early reviews, and maybe CBS thought it could succeed where the others had failed. It didn't. In December, CBS will move it to Wednesday nights, hoping to boost the poor ratings. Additionally, Bob Cummings will quit the show for reasons still unclear after 21 episodes. His last show will air on February 10, 1965. His sidekick, Dr. Peter Robinson, played by Jack Mulaney, will take over as lead for the rest of the season. At the end of that first season, My Living Doll will be canceled. Clearly, television had taken a turn for the high concept and the silly in the fall of 1964. Some of this was undoubtedly due to the success of high concept crazier shows like The Beverly Hillbillies and My Favorite Martian, which had finished 1st and 10th in the ratings in the 1963-64 season. It's also been said that advertisers preferred to sponsor the goofier shows. If you'd been watching Requiem for a Heavyweight, a commercial with a woman dancing around her kitchen because her floors were sparkling clean tended to look ridiculous. If you'd been watching Gilligan playing catch with a gorilla and a hand grenade, it made more sense. All 3 networks have been featuring kids programming on Saturday mornings since 1962. Mostly it was old theatrical cartoons like Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny, or reruns of old live-action TV shows for kids. More and more the networks were creating their own original programming for Saturday morning. In 1964, some of the notables included ABC's Hoppity Hopper on September 12th from J. Ward Productions, who had already brought us The Bullwinkle Show. On September 26th, Linus the Lionhearted on CBS featured a cast of cartoon characters who doubled as pitchmen for Post serials. And on October 3rd, Underdog, a comic superhero who protected innocent reporter Sweet Polly Purebred from villains Riff Raff and Simon Bar Sinister, debuts on NBC. Being on CBS, Linus the Lionhearted was in black and white. The others were in color for those few lucky enough to have color sets. Our old friends the Beach Boys were having a phenomenally busy quarter in addition to their own releases all summer long and When I Grew Up to Be a Man, which we'll begin discussing next time. There were also Beach Boy related releases. Released on August 5th, the Annette at Bikini Beach album contains The Monkey's Uncle featuring the Beach Boys. The group had recorded their parts back on June 16th. The track will be released as a single on February 24, 1965. In what seems like a case of surprisingly poor planning, the movie won't go into wide release until August 18, 1965. On September 1st, the single Little Honda by the Hondells is released. Written by and featuring a lead vocal from Brian Wilson, the single will peak at number 9 on October 31st. More about this when we discuss Little Honda from the All Summer Long album. On September 28th, Jan and Dean's Ride the Wild Surf album is released. The title track, written by Jan Berry, Roger Christian, and Brian Wilson, had been released as a single on August 26th. It'll peak at number 16 on October 31st. The album contains another Berry Christian Wilson composition, Surf and Wild, as well as the previously released Altfeld Berry Wilson composition, She's My Summer Girl. The album will go to number 66. As the quarter began, the Beach Boys had just finished sessions for their Christmas album, which will be released in the fall. On July 3rd, they begin their summer safari tour in Honolulu. They spend 3 days in Hawaii, appearing in the $1 Million Party, a huge bill that includes, among others, Jan and Dean, Bruce and Terry, the Righteous Brothers, the Kingsmen, Freddie Cannon, and Peter and Gordon, whose song A World Without Love is pushed out of the number 1 spot on the singles chart by I Get Around on the second day of the event, July 4th. After the $1 Million Party concludes on July 5th, the Beach Boys tour takes in 36 dates in the West and Midwest, ending in San Diego on August 8th. By this time, of course, Beach Boys concerts have generally featured a lot of screaming girls in the audience. Much of that screaming is inspired by Dennis. On August 21st, 13 days after finishing their last tour, and after a break during which they cut a new single, the Beach Boys head back out on the road for more touring in the Midwest and the East. This tour will end on September 26th in West Orange, New Jersey. The next day, Sunday, September 27th, the group go to New York where they're headliners on the season premiere of The Ed Sullivan Show, performing I Get Around and Wendy. The Beach Boys have almost certainly become America's biggest rock act. The pressure for more touring, more records, and more personal appearances is unrelenting as Brian and the group head into the fourth quarter of the year. Next time we'll begin our look at the Beach Boys' summer 1964 releases, All Summer Long and When I Grew Up to Be a Man. Hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to your comments. Please hit like if you don't mind and subscribe if you haven't. Have a great week and I hope you'll join us next time. Bye.